And false news has become all too common. More alarming, some media outlets publish
What's up, bro?
What's going on? What's going on? Great to be back in the studio.
Yes, indeed.
Lots happening.
Glad I'm inside, not outside.
I know. It was
Very
24
cold.
degrees this morning, and thank
Arctic
goodness.
plunge or whatever it is.
Yeah, now Florida's getting snow, I hear.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that wild? I don't even know the last time it snowed in the Panhandle. Long time ago.
Are the LA wildfires still going?
Yes, they are. I mean, they're working on the containment, which is good. But yeah, they're still burning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just had snow. Florida's getting snow. Texas was frozen.
Yep.
California burning.
I feel like
Wild weather.
There's been a lot of the crazy weather events, and then the David Lynch death. Is I don't know if that's an omen. I don't know if he's the omen or if the fire was an omen of him dying. I haven't figured that out yet.
Which I actually
Pretty
looked
wild.
for Twin Peaks the other night.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what streaming service it's on. I think it's like Paramount.
it's probably on Peacock. I don't know actually. That's a good question.
I don't have Paramount.
You can
so
rent
it's
it on
kinda-
Prime. But in memoriam, I watched Lost Highway, which was pretty stellar.
Is that a film?
Yeah, it's one of his earlier movies. Or not early, I guess, kind of in the middle of his career. But
A lot of film friends that you and I both know had it
Yeah.
all over their social media. I've never been tuned into David Lynch really. I think I've heard him in passing, but like
sure,
paying attention to how many film people that were like
Yeah.
mourning his loss.
yeah.
So now I feel obligated to pay respect.
He is one of the rare
go dig
ones that, an auteur artist who made it mainstream. So,
Yeah.
I mean, was able to have some commercial funding and commercial success, even though he made very unique and, very, very strong art.
What's his
lot
most
of-
mainstream film that like let's say common folks who aren't really film people might know, even if they didn't know that was David Lynch?
The most mainstream property would be Twin Peaks,
Okay.
just because it was on network television, and it preceded X-Files by about a year. It was really one of the first mainstream network shows that delved into surrealist horror questions involving the occult and the other side and ghosts and spirits and dimensions and I mean all kinds of stuff, right? Like spirituality, Native Americans. I mean, there's just a lot of really interesting lore that he created,
Right.
and
All from his mind, written and then
Yeah.
produced.
him and Mark Frost, they did Twin Peaks together. So, his kind of writing partner, production partner. But and then Lynch had his own properties, like more films that he would make. If you talk about mainstream films, probably most commercially successful would be Mulholland Drive because it had Naomi Watts in it, amongst others. But I love Lost Highway. It's so
Yeah.
good. I mean, it's just the premise of that movie, just the setup, which is awesome. It's a surreal horror film, basically. But imagine a couple in Los Angeles who are kind of affluent art couple. He's a saxophone player. She's a model type actress. And what happens is VHS tapes start to turn up on their doorstep in a blank envelope. And when they put the tape in, it's like it's a shot of their house. And then like the next tape is like something else. So it's early, cool, surreal horror. It's a great
Yeah.
one. It's really good. But anyways, I mean that I got the honor of meeting him one time.
No way.
Yeah, he was really into transcendental meditation and became a big time advocate for it and founded a screenwriting school that was a part of the Maharishi University. But I went to a lecture that he gave with Bob Roth, who is another TM author and advocate and kind of guru type businessman.
That name rings more bells with me.
Yeah, and they gave a joint lecture followed by a book signing, and
Okay.
so of course I stood in line to meet David Lynch, and he was very, very humble and
Yeah.
honored to be there. And he always had that very genuine personality. That's what everybody just harps on, is just how real and honest he was, and he was one of the kindest people I've ever met. Even in that
Right.
just interaction, he didn't know me from anybody. And
You can
he's-
feel genuine, I don't know, kindness and goodwill towards people exudes
Yeah.
from people. You
I
can
could
feel it in
feel
their presence.
I could feel his spirit. I mean,
Yeah.
he was just like, "Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you were here. I'm like, dude, I'm just
That's how I felt with Jordan Peterson.
right. Yeah, there's people like
Sometimes
that.
I just forgot in his speech that there was anybody else in the room. I thought he was just talking to me.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I feel like fanboys, fangirls like feel that way when artists is performing. But I just mean in
Yeah.
terms of, especially when their whole goal is your self development.
Yeah.
And they know the struggle you've faced as
Enriching you as a
men
person,
and
right?
human. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.
So, obviously we honor David Lynch. We thank him for all that
Right.
he's done for us, and his art will live on. So,
Yeah, there's two of my huge, both philosophical and literary heroes, both passed kind of before my time. Terrence McKenna is one of them. I believe he passed like the year I was born, 96, 97. And we'll get into some of his stuff today, which is what I looked into for preparing for this podcast. But then Robert Jordan, he does the Wheel of Time series, which is a 14-book series. Now they're going through doing it on Amazon, which is pretty. I think the show's pretty good. This got mixed reviews.
I really want to get into the Wheel of Time. I mean, obviously the books are very daunting, but maybe the series could be my entry point. You know, that's it's definitely the type of material I'd be interested in. So.
Yeah, I mean, it gets into millions of words, and right now I'm actually reading a kind of a informational book about the author and about his process writing the book, and it has been eye-opening just in terms of learning more about his inspirations and things that were in the book that I didn't even, I didn't draw those parallels because I was pretty young when I read it, and then I was like a young teenager when I finished it. But it was like fundamental, I think, to some of my young philosophies that led me to kind of a sense of adventure, and also a sense of like finding the balance that would lead on to like studying things like Taoism or other philosophies, because he worked that into his stuff. He was kind of like Tolkien, where his world building pulled from our world in like a mythical and philosophical sense, so you could draw parallels, but yet he created his own story, so you had your own moral lessons.
Now, how many books are there?
There's 14 in the main series, and there's like a prequel.
14, that's crazy.
And like a
when were these all? When were these all written? What was kind of when did they 60s, 70s, 80s kind of thing, or?
I believe the first book was published in the 80s, early 80s. And he died before the last 2 books were published.
I see.
Actually, the last 3 books. He thought he was going to have 12.
Yeah.
And the 12th he passed, and all of his notes, and his wife, they essentially did this kind of competition of close writers to see who could like just with the prompt, who could write a good story and sound like him while also giving it freshness and uniqueness. And this guy Brandon Sanderson, who's also a renowned best-selling author, he won, and so he wrote and finished the series, which was great because by the end of it there was so much, right? And he really helped give some freshness. He's a younger author, so it was a little easier and smoother read the last 3 books.
Gotcha.
But he did justice because Robert Jordan literally had thousands upon thousands of notes. I mean, he was one of those that his book was actually a library of material, and he had like his wife and like 2 or 3 assistants that just combed through his notes, documented what his rough storyline was.
Yeah.
He's an amazing author. So.
That's cool. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, for sure.
I think, talking about these artist creators, they very much have delved into these, more ethereal topics, like what we're going to talk about today. This more about consciousness and what that means and what existence means and how we interact with the creator, whatever that may be to different people.
Intangible reality.
Yeah, what is our reality versus other realities that may coexist with us? I mean, it's all the big questions, right? And that's where art does a good job. Really, that's an understatement. Art fulfills the purpose of allowing us to explore, these other ideas outside of our own reality and what may be there.
Sci-fi is an amazing category and medium for that, because our topic today is simulation theory.
Yeah,
it is a theory. And most people, again, then we're like, oh, you want to talk about simulation, but it's like the Matrix really is what entered it into the mainstream conversation. It took 15 years. First it was like, oh, that's a cool movie with a cool concept, and then as people have dissected it, and also as the public conversation has progressed, and we've become more okay with UFO and cryptids and conspiracy theories, alternative perspectives of the reality we're experiencing, then like Matrix was like, okay, this is a download into a bigger theory and possibility.
That's right. I mean, the Matrix was that sort of action accessible entry point to bigger ideas. Right. I mean, it gave people a way in and kind of open their mind to like, what is this about, and what is this movie about? I mean, you look at all the Reddit threads and theories and
Right.
forums dedicated to the Matrix, exploring the Matrix and what does this mean and what does this symbolize, and red pill, blue pill, and all this kind of stuff, free will,
Yes.
and
Red pill, blue pill. You've been red pilled. That's all over social media.
there's
these
so
days.
much richness to the Matrix, and when we talk about simulation theory, we're going way past that surface level. Oh, we live in a program. No, it's more
Right,
like
so
what all's out there that lends itself to these ideas, and how are they separate and how are they the same, right?
right. So we're touching on like there's like a baseline perception of simulation theory that is based off the Matrix. And, I'd love your take on it. My take on it is like the basic premise is, that somewhere in this world's timeline we got taken over by machines and then put in a vat to be farmed for our biometric energy, whatever, and then we're putting this computer simulation that like Neuralink, something like that is
Yeah.
able to take over all of your neural network to be able to experience things that aren't tangibly real.
Well, those
they
people
may be real with other consciousnesses, but it's not real in the sense of like the physical world we live, but it's the same
Yeah.
sensation and the same mental experience.
and you're given eternal life in the process. They're
Yeah.
forever connected to these, avatar systems.
with a fine-tuned experience algorithm
Yeah.
that keeps them just enough suffering and just enough happiness so that they are comfortable forgetting that they might be not in the real world.
I think that, the Matrix explores so many different existing philosophies, which
Mhm.
I think is what made it, other than being an awesome movie, that the through lines of that, theological elements, philosophical elements, spiritual elements has just made it stand the test of time. And it asks more questions than it answers. And that's what great art does. That's the David Lynch thing. He asks more questions than he answers. And I think it allows you to really process in your own mind, what does this mean to me? How does this impact my worldview? And, my consciousness, my questions of existence and causality and purpose and free will and things like that. I think it gets back to the idea, all of it, to the creator, and the clockmaker. And it's sort of, that's the deist outlook, that this was all sort of built and then wound up and then let go. And then the question becomes, okay, if there's a clockmaker, then we are in a simulation.
Right.
That was created by the creator.
Right.
But inside of that, we have the free will to choose our next step in life,
Or do we?
Or do we?
That's the
And
thing about the Matrix is it kind of feel like it pulls you along the nose saying, you're here in the computer. Well, now he's not in the computer. To you're the chosen one. Well, you're not the chosen one. And, I guess where I challenge myself in the Matrix is like, is he still in the computer even when he unplugs?
Sure.
Right.
Simulation side of it.
Because
Yeah.
if indeed he's supposed to be this one who beats the game, beats the creator, but yet the creator is I programmed you, right? So the free will that he thinks he's acting upon is actually what he's created and born to do.
Yeah.
Right? So in that sense,
He's
it's like
the program that does
it's a
that.
blend of free will and determinism, right? Which kind of they don't coexist well, right? But those are conflicting. I mean, that's where we
it's the
live
illusion
as
of free
humans,
will, right? It's like that idea that, well, I have free will, but my free will's within the rules of the game. I can't choose outside of the game. I didn't have conscious free will that I know of to enter the game, right? I was placed into the game by the powers that be, by my parents, by, subconscious, by spiritual forces. So, but then once I'm in the game, how do I play the game? And how does my playing of the game impact my outcome ultimately? Right. And that's sort of, I think that's the red pill, blue pill part of the Matrix, where it's like you get the free will in the game. These are programs you get to choose.
Right.
Which path would you like to go down? And it's, if you think, if you look at the multi timelines theory, there's infinite paths.
Right.
And some of them may all exist at the same time. I mean, that's the idea of the multiverse, right? So, and a lot of what's happening, I think, astrally and, in deep space and even in our own sort of multidimensional realities, they think. And at CERN, you hear stories of them opening portals and things like what does that really mean? Multidimensional coexisting, and these questions of, other entities that are invading our dimension from their own dimension that just exists on top of ours or underneath ours in the same space as us.
I think that's a great segue into where we're intending to go with this podcast topic with the gentleman who's doing the laser experiments, right?
Yeah.
Creating, a laser projection cross section on the wall, and then giving people low doses of
That's right.
dimethyltryptamine.
Yeah, DMT.
And then they
Danny
look into
Goler
that. Right.
is his name. Danny Goler. We're going to try to have him on at some point. But that's, yeah.
Because, right, the idea of dimensions is, there's the Cartesian plane of XY that everybody learned in algebra, which is, up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get into calculus, that's when you add the Z, right? The passing of time, or just volume, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about things from another dimension, I think usually we think of another place, but when scientifically, and I think philosophically, when you're talking about higher dimensions, it's, we only have a 4D experience of this world, at least we think, that we have up, down, depth, and then time, right? Time is the silent watcher that watches all things rise and fall and shapes everything, right? Time or death, whatever you want to, essentially the same thing, right?
Motion. Yeah.
And so, beings that exist at a 5th or 6th, 7th dimension, we don't even know necessarily what that looks like. 5D would probably be outside of time and, not bound, so therefore not bound by matter.
Yeah. One of the most interesting thoughts about that I've had of late is in Lou Elizondo's book about, UAP incursions. It's called Imminent. But in regards to time and space and dimensionality, he talks about the interactions with some of these craft in air incursions, where they're encountering Air Force or Navy pilots. And the way he described it is, it's as if these craft are existing in their own space-time.
Yeah.
And that they are moving through space-time at a different, whether you call that rate,
think of like
or
when
mode,
you are
dimensionality, really.
Like old videotapes, VHS tapes, right? When you plug the tape in, oh man, it's at the end. And the last time I watched it, I fell asleep. I was halfway through it. So let me rewind. Okay, well, not quite close enough. That's the way you sort data as you go. Let me chop it in half.
Yeah.
See which
What's
half.
the last thing I remember?
Yeah, right. And then you fast forward to that spot. And so I think that these vessels, like you're saying, they're in their own envelope where they see our time as like an archive where they go, I want to see that. So, and their craft is just there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe they do have some actual, once they're there, some mobility and independent movement. But
so,
I think ultimately they're just not affected by.
And
they
in the
come
context
from a place where they're not affected by this.
That's right. In the context of this conversation, it's the idea of dimensionality and consciousness, and the reason I bring up the UAP thing is because there's so many paranormal layers to it when you hear these experts talk about it that have done research in the field. And, now they're saying that people with psionic powers can summon these things in subconscious consciousness through meditation forms. This was recent in the last couple of weeks. So we're dealing with all the same stuff here, right? It's like the idea of consciousness, multidimensionality, simulation theory, in the sense that how does it exist in that space-time that we only perceive linearly.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think you struck it on the chord. Like, modern contemporary thought is we're seeing this as a super advanced technology in terms of computers and digital.
Yeah.
But I think the technology seems to be, dipping into the paranormal in the sense that it's about the same things we've been plagued by all throughout our history.
The technology component is what
leads into the paranormal.
The technology component is speeding up our acknowledgement of it and our sorting through it, which goes back to the laser experiment that Danny Goler's doing. It's like these lasers they're projecting on the wall that then a person looks at the laser, but through the laser, almost like they're looking at a 4D.
Right, they're trying to like kind of relax and look beyond.
Relax their eyes, and whenever they do that, they're seeing what looks like matrix type code running down the wall or being a part of the wall, right? And they describe it as looking like Japanese characters or hieroglyphic type characters, a language code of some type.
Reminds me of like the Star Wars.
Yeah, the Star Wars alphabet.
Codes.
That's yeah, exactly. Or
It's
even
kind of like jagged.
it reminds me of the Klingon alphabet. Kind of looks like that. So the interesting thing about this is that now he's conducted this experiment repeatedly, hundreds of times with people that don't know what he's wanting them to see. In other words, he doesn't tell them anything. He gives them a microdose of DMT.
That's a real experiment, folks.
Lasers on the walls. Yeah, I mean, what needs to happen next is funded research. But, you know, project the lasers on the walls, wide beams, like an inch, you know, that intersect. And then the person gets up close and looks at the laser, relaxes their eyes like they're looking at one of those 4D pictures.
Right.
That the dentist used to have on the
like
ceiling.
when you're watching a 3D movie, you can't like try to focus on your. You just kind of like relax and let it kind of like.
You look through it.
The
so the
image
code
come
is
together.
not in the laser, but the laser is revealing the code that's in the wall. Now, something he hasn't done yet is like, let's try this on a cup. Let's try this on a tree. Is it everywhere?
Right.
This code, you know, is this laser going to reveal it? I mean, that's super interesting. I'd like to see that as funded research.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the interesting thing, you know, there are parallels to this. I don't know if you ever sneezed really hard or, you know, had, you know, stood up and the blood rushed to your head. And sometimes you can see like floaties. People talk about, you can see the little things going like this and then it fades or something like that. You know, there's that. And people try to explain that away to just, you know, things in your eyes, like whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's also, you know, when you do meditation, let's say in a dark room, or, you know, you can even do the thing where you know, put slight pressure on your eyes and you can start to see, you know, fractal type visuals, right?
Sure.
And
I remember that from when I was a kid in bed at nighttime, having trouble going to sleep. And whenever you close your eyes and you're still awake,
you're
I mean, you just see everything.
Void. Yeah.
You just see all sorts of stuff in the blackness in your eyes. And I remember as a kid thinking, like, is that on the back of my eyelids? What am I seeing? You
Always,
know?
dude.
Yeah, and I'm sure all kids did that. And it was sort of like, what am I seeing here? You know?
Interestingly enough, and I talked to this about some people, but not enough. Whenever I close my eyes, and let's say I push down on the top of my head, and, like hard enough, I usually see in my mental vision, I see little pressure spots at the bottom of my eyes.
Sure.
Right. So in my head, that makes me feel like I know that our eyes invert an image, right? Because we're looking out, and then our brain reverse image to what we actually
the magic
behold.
of the eye.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it leads me to think almost like my consciousness is looking downwards at something, and that's where this it kind of is like again inverted, right? And that's where, you know, with this DMT stuff, you're getting into things like your third eye, which you know, that has its woo-woo kind of new agey thing.
Well, it
but its
reminds me
ideas
of
on the real principle that a blind man still sees, right?
Yeah.
He has no physical vision, but, you know, he's going to see images. He's going to see impulses, electrical impulses. He's going to see memories more vividly, you know.
Reminds me of Doctor Strange, you know, the astral projection.
Right.
Like there's that scene where he's in the fight with the guy in the first movie and they go into he's in the hospital and then their astral projections get in a fight together because his body's like on a gurney and he's dying, you know, and you hear these stories of people who near death and they're like, oh yeah, I left my body and I was watching the doctors work on me, you know, so it's like, there is this sort of cultural acceptance of this, you know, third eye part of you that can exist outside of your body. Yeah, exactly. Sort of that consciousness and what that is, the soul aspect.
People, and I think that, again, that greatly connects with the, you know, the basis of today's topic of this, you know, experiment, right? Because dimethyltryptamine, you know, obviously it's a Schedule I drug, but it's also inherently in all of our bodies and in all organic material.
Yeah.
So you also naturally have two releases when, you know, one when you're born, so you don't even remember it, but, you know, especially through a child, you get many releases because you're getting lots of serotonin and all these things, plenty of sleep, plenty of melatonin.
And it happens in trauma experiences, right?
Near-death experiences where your body thinks it's going to die, it will release that.
It's kind of protecting your brain from overload, right?
I mean, think about it. If you were about to die, we always think of dying as like this, we're going to experience something agonizing. And you may, right? I'm sure there's forms of slow death that are pretty rough.
Yeah.
But when your body knows it's going to die, it immediately releases all of its DMT.
The dopamine, the DMT.
You will experience the most transcendent, experience, and maybe again,
That's where your life flashes before your
yes,
eyes, stuff like
things
that.
become timeless. Maybe you experience something higher, replaying memories. You see loved ones.
It's like bringing all that subconscious out of you, all the memories. And
the last firework show, essentially, of
it's
all
like your
life.
cache is loading all at the same time. It's like, whoosh, you know?
Right. And so that's where I think, you know, most, you know, a lot of religious, you know, you can talk about the literature, but I'm just talking about religious encounters where people say they experience, you know, passing or going and meeting an angel because they almost died, or experiencing God. I think, you know, I think these are connected. I don't think it's just a chemical or a drug. I think that spiritual reality outside the simulation reality is mirrored by physical things. I think they're attached, right? So when something has, just like in my opinion, we have a soul, our physical manifestation is our body, right? So it is a physical body, but it's tied to something, right? And so I think in the same way, operations of the spirit or things as spiritual, it's may have a physical manifestation. I think that's what this simulation box is for.
Yeah.
Experiencing something on this level. And so
I have a question. Like, do you think that with this emergence of rapidly moving technology, AI, machine learning, quantum computing, are they going to figure it out before humans? You know, I feel like that the capacity of these AI systems already have the ability to answer questions that we don't have answers to and have failed to get answers to. And I almost feel like the spiritual and conscious truth that's going to come out of these systems could up in society, you know, and we may run into this world where you have sects SECTS of society who hold on to the organic past and the truths of humanity as understood in
the old ways.
Books, the old ways, and then you're going to have this new sort of culture of society who says no, the AI has all the answers. It's telling we haven't been able to hack this formula of quantum, you know, mechanics for decades.
You couldn't come up with that idea in a million years.
And AI just figured it out, and it's given us the gift of infinite energy, and you know, quantum travel and all this other stuff. I mean, these are questions of beyond morality, beyond ethics, into the very fabric of our existence, and like the idea of consciousness and understanding of it, and getting to the root of the creator. You know, like what will AI say about who created us, who created my creator? And it reminds me of if I could ask the aliens one question, these travelers, interdimensional travelers, I would ask them, who created you? Do you know where you came from? That's my question, right? I wouldn't be intimidated by their existence in front of me.
Yeah.
That's the one question I would ask them, because then that would reveal potentially their motives.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the root of it all to me. What do you think about how AI and this acceleration of quantum computing could play a role in all of this?
I think if you had a genuine AI that did not have an alignment problem and that was truly just trying to get to the root of a solution, even if it wasn't an answer, it was just, here's what you're missing. Go look here. I think this AI would probably say, you know, as this machine, there's only so much computation I can experience. The truth lies in what you can experience as a physical being, which again is the integration of things like the DMT experience, of spiritual experience, human experience, love, art, inspiration. Again, go look, because that's where we can't look, but all factors point towards this is the anomaly that is the clue of something more, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of always been, you know, all these simulation theories. It's an ancient idea, truly, and we'll get into some of that. But kind of all of them have this crux where there's always a sliver somewhere that is your thread to pull it apart. And what that is whether it's a clue, whether it's a UFO, or whether it's you know a spirit experience with, you know, your God and your loved one who's passed, or whatever it is. There's something that can upset and ripple you, and that's your red pill, blue pill moment. Is when you say 90% of what I'm being told, you know, is this, and it's this physical, tangible, mechanical reality. But then there are these little things that become so big, right? Whether it's coincidences or inspirations or intuitions.
Well, you look at any type of societal upheaval, you know, it's never welcomed with open arms. I
Right.
mean, the obvious example would be like the Christ figure in the Middle East, in the midst of the Roman Empire's expansion and the cultural change, in the region, and he out comes this figure who says, all of these leaders are corrupted, and you shouldn't listen to any of them. The truth is inside of you.
Right.
God has sent me here to tell you this. So, and how did that work out? I mean, he got executed, right? And
Right.
they started murdering anybody who believed in him for hundreds of years, right? So, and then through the Crusades and everything else. I mean, there was a lot of, and there still is today. I mean, there's a lot of animosity towards believers in that message, in some places in the world. So I think any type of societal uprooting, upheaval is going to cause clash of culture, and I think the next big one will be this singularity of technology, and maybe it's the integration of the AI into the human brain and the Neuralink stuff, and you have this new
Yeah.
species of cyborgs walking
Yeah.
around.
What if the neural network, these things that we're doing to ourselves, is what we're trying to do is use external technology so that someone has access to the reality we're connected to at a subconscious
I
level.
almost think the AI is going to convince us, because it's going to basically say like, look, you have the spiritual conscious connection to the unknown. I have all the know-how and knowledge. We need to partner up.
Is that a
So
tower? Is that a Tower of Babel
yeah,
idea here?
you need to we need to mesh our brains. So
Yeah.
here's my quantum computer AI. Put it into your human organic brain with your soul, and we're
We
gonna
will never
figure
know
it out.
everything.
You're gonna figure it out
Yeah.
together. That was like the
That's the
end of the.
unfortunate
That's
thing.
like end time stuff, right? It's like,
Right. Well, the
yeah,
AI is going to be have such a threshold for data
it's
and
where man becomes
information.
God.
We will never. I think we think we'll get plugged up to the AI and then we'll know everything. We'll be
Yeah.
able to just know everything, and it's like your brain doesn't have the capacity. You don't have the threshold of attention to absorb.
Or does
And
it? There's so much power in the brain that they don't even know. All the untapped.
I
They
guess
say
I
we
think
only
there
use
is.
5% of it.
I don't think there's just like a download where you would
Yeah.
become just as knowledgeable as it. There would be so much trust, and again, our bandwidth of how much our focus we can pay attention to just this moment that
Yeah.
we're here. I just I
What's
think
going to
we would
happen when
get into
Elon?
the
What's
AI's
going?
like, trust me, just trust me, bro.
Yeah.
Just
What's going to
trust
happen
me.
when Elon Musk becomes eternal? Like
Well, they keep telling us.
whenever he gets the Neuralink and he's like, I'm going to live for 500 years now, guys.
They keep telling us be
I mean, it's
prepared
like,
not to die by the
and
in
that,
your lifetime,
yeah,
mine in your lifetime. They're telling people our age to be prepared not to
yeah. I
age.
heard
That's scary because I think that's almost like the vaccine promise of if you get this, you'll never get sick and you'll never
yeah.
get anybody sick.
The latest thing I read was like if you're under 50, you'll be able to live to 150
Yeah.
and potentially to 200. So imagine 50 years from now, those people really will be able to live forever, or
I think it's
in
definitely
some
like
form.
if you're telomeres and aging, it's kind of like if you've ever smoked cigarettes, really, you're not.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be disqualified from being an astronaut.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be something like that where there's just
we'll
a
be the
threshold where-
last of the humans.
That's right. Authentic. Be all these replicants.
We're
after
not
us.
counterfeit.
That's right.
Yeah, we're the real thing. Okay, back to consciousness and sort of
Right.
this, the idea of the simulation and stuff like this. I mean, the role that technology is going to play in it. It's interesting that the laser technology reveals it.
Right.
There's all these layers. Tell us about, I guess, the more organic aspect, the McKenna point of view.
Yeah, and so when I was looking into it and his kind of thoughts on it, he referred to a work by Carl Jung, which is again, I think, the father of modern psychology.
Sure.
Even if most people aren't aware of that.
He's I
Um,
concur.
he believed that in a very symbolic, subconscious version of the world, that what we experience in our glimpse of this reality is the reality is like our greater self is our body and our subconscious that is moving throughout a dark place that is a labyrinth of being, right?
Mhm.
And then our physical apparatus gives us a little glimpse of what's out there.
Yeah.
And that this process is all subconscious. The unconscious is what he called it. And so a little different than the subconscious. The unconscious is the collective subconscious of humanity, right? And that we exist in that realm. And therefore, most of the things we experience, these greater symbols, whether it's religion or the daily things in your life, like the coincidences and that
Mhm.
animal stopped and looked you right in the eye
Yeah.
at a moment you were going through something, and
Yeah.
it just told you that everything's going to be
You
okay.
dreamed
Right?
something that happened the next
Or
day.
you dream something that happened the next day, or
Yep.
deja vu, right? These are echoes and the greater part of your whole is untapped by most people. And so he believed that the UFO phenomena is, in some sense, a sliver of that it's like in as much as whatever we understand that the reality we're in is how we perceive it and feel it, right? That's our first experience. That you have to start with the fact that I'm sitting here too and I have hands, right? And so whatever we call organic reality, it is as such as we experience it, however you want to linguistically explain it away. And that's where Terrence McKenna kind of drifted into the idea of like things like art, things like these slivers of coincidence, meeting someone that you fall in love with across the room, and you just feel this gravity. These are the things that lift us above the Newtonian physics that we know in the book, because that reality doesn't, when it comes to moving matters and building houses and the weather, like this is all, it is mechanistic, and these models work. They're we can't predict everything, but we can at least put structure and experiment and employ science.
Yeah.
But obviously the only realm where you can't employ objective science is the realm of consciousness, right? It's
The
realm
space
of,
dust, right?
right.
Yeah.
And obviously we're reaching the technological ceiling of what we can perceive right now with the UFO phenomena. It's possible there's way more that we don't understand. And so Terrence McKenna believed that we're part of some great, either kind of like organic art or artifice, as he would reference it. Essentially that, almost like we're part of a grand living movie that, we experience our separateness, but we also experience a wholeness that is kind of plucking at our understanding of what we're a part of. And so he believed that we're inside the human collective conscious organism. And then he believed that above that is a more, he called it Gaia, right? So Gaia is the collective organism of the earth. And then he believed that Gaia was inside of a greater being than that, right? And that's kind of a blend of Western and Eastern thought.
Yeah, it's Western, Eastern thought, mysticism, religion,
cosmic egg,
spirituality. I mean, it's a little bit of everything, right? And whenever you look into whether it's Buddhism, and the illusion of self, the collective consciousness idea, the spirituality in the Bible, there's a lot of mysticism that connects it all into this existence of a clockmaker, a creator, all-knowing God that preceded the Big Bang, the uncausable cause, so on. There's names for it in every culture, much like the flood happened in every culture. So ultimately, what you just said, I think, is a really great human understanding or way to explain it in a non-religious way,
Right.
more of sort of a scientific way, but it's really pointing to the same thing. I mean, it reminds me of Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. It's similar to that in the way that, it's the consciousness with 1,000 faces. It's the existence with 1,000 faces. All these different human cultures have tried to
in
explain
Hinduism,
it.
that's
right?
what Brahma is. He's the god of, like you say, a million faces.
Yeah.
That there is no knowing him. You will only know one aspect of him, and if you're lucky, you'll meet two in your life. Right. That's kind of their going philosophy.
Yeah.
And if you have trouble, at least with the idea of we're part of a larger organism idea, it's not so hard to think about when you think about your own body that,
Just go watch Star Wars.
Well, in the sense of your own physical body, though, you have organisms that live inside of you, whole biomes of bacteria, viruses,
worlds inside of worlds.
things that bugs, worms, and they may have no idea. They're microscopic. They have no idea what they're a part of. They're on planet Ben, right? They're on planet Johnny.
Yeah.
So, they don't even have to experience the greater whole they're part of, but yet they contribute to your overall health, and then you're in control of this, right? So the idea that, the Earth is just a big body with skin and bones and, grass and trees for hair, it's and mycelium for nervous system.
Well, it's a part of this larger existence that's infinite. And, we went to the planetarium last week and looked at Mars and Jupiter and Saturn. And I mean, it's just, you look at Jupiter through, observatory telescope, and you see the gradation of the colors on the planet's surface, and you see its moons, and you're like, wow, it's just awesome, right? It's so far away, and there it is, and that is like our neighbor. It's not even like space is, universe is infinite. So the idea that we're the only ones here, no, like we're all part of this larger existence.
Right.
Everything is part of molecular makeup, atomic, quantum mechanics, quantum realm. I mean, I don't know. It's all, there's so many layers to existence that we're obviously all part of one large living thing, which is the universe,
Right.
right?
Living system, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Right? And, our body is a collection of systems. So you just get back to this, the body of stars, we scale our understanding of the universe based on the constitution of the human being, which that has echoed back millennia, right?
Yeah.
So ancient thought was that, again, that this thing is some sort of either machine, the planet is actually some type of machine ship or a living thing, right? And they thought the same about the stars, right? Jupiter, Saturn, that they wove them into, these are our gods, these are our angels, these are our archangels. And, from a technological standpoint, if, the Earth is this system, electromagnetic system, then, all these planets are also some form. If it's not an intelligent entity, in some sense, it totally is an intelligent system.
Yeah.
That maybe has a role to play in, people into the, more straightforward simulation stuff say like, oh, well, the moon is really like a satellite dish that they shoot, in the center of the earth, there's like a black sun and it projects the illusion out onto the moon, reflects it back, and we experience that. And I'm like, okay, that's a little intense.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of, I think, if you just look at it in a technology, if this is a simulation and these things are playing a technological role in whatever, I guess, dimension of technology we're talking about here,
Yeah.
It's not outlandish, right? And so I think, again, the human ideas
I think it's entirely reasonable.
right. That's why I think, we have so much in common throughout history as we explore the reality that we're plagued by the same questions, the same human condition, and the same limits. And we're still thinking like, gosh, this isn't, I know what I experience says this is it, but I know there's more than just my five senses.
Yeah, that kind of shifts into this, not only the Buddhist theory of the self, all is mind, and but the collective consciousness, the hive mind.
Right.
I mean, this stuff, it's all sort of relating to the same. It's all saying the same thing. Like you have different people throughout history, different religions, different cultures with theoretical ideas about existence and consciousness and God and spirituality. And, they're all kind of saying the same thing, that there's a higher power that we are a part of, that we need to seek,
right?
To find the ultimate truths, ultimate human truths, and really live by what we call ethics and morals, so that we can have a peaceable existence amongst each other.
Right.
The collective consciousness idea, the hive mind, lends itself to sort of more of the psychic, psionic, paranormal aspects of consciousness that they're starting to uncover. Of course, the CIA and other three-letter agencies have been doing these experiments for decades, trying to figure out, okay, remote viewing, what is that? What are these psionic powers? How does Vegas always know the football lines? Do they have remote viewers? I don't know.
Yeah.
This idea of the hive mind, getting to that is, we're all part of the same living organism, right? I mean, that's essentially it.
I mean, the baseline of all these, and I call some of these philosophies, whether, some people won't call them religion, but I mean, they would call it technologies, the science of itself, the science of the yoga, or, the mind. But, they all have the baseline of denial of self, right? And then in that denial of self, you go into deep meditation, or you go into a quiet place and you are silent, right?
Yeah.
And in that place, you experience faith if you open yourself. And so that's where, again, in these systems, you experience the thing you're a part of. That's how people have these inclinations that we're part of something, is because when you do that, you deny your self-experience, you shut off maybe your physical, you just, like you're going to sleep, right, in meditation, and you just experience what's there, then you get some type of sense that I am part of something else, or I am experiencing more than just the norm. And then from there, it's like, well, what are you going to do about it? Like, how do you translate? How do you integrate that? And with collective consciousness, the kind of idea is that, yes, indeed, there's some type of field. I like using the word field because I think it's a really good term. In terms
force.
Right, because like a magnet emits a field, right? It's not all, things don't always flow the way like water does, right? And so this field within it, it's not tangible, it's not physical lines, but it is a space in which information or forces can be acted upon. So in the same way, consciousness could be like your Wi-Fi, where there's this general network, right? And then so that's why they
nobody understands it,
right? You have like monkeys on one island that learn that if I wash my fruit before I eat it, I become healthy. This has actually happened. This is real. I'm healthier. And it may not have been monkeys. It might have been another little critter on an island.
Yeah.
And then literally they observed like 100 miles away within like a few weeks, other little baby monkeys started doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And then within a generation or two, all the monkeys on the island washed their fruit before they ate
Well,
it.
it also is a way to explain, like, all the pyramids that were built at the same time around the world.
Or inventors, inventing the same things.
Inventing the same things, getting the same type of, whether they were messages from other, other entities or parties, or they just were having this hive mind of shared, Tesla and Edison and, Egyptian pyramids and the ziggurats and, the Machu Picchu all at the same cultural times. And
it's a scary space too, right? Because like when you think about all of this not being real simulation, right? You feel like this may be fake. Am I real? It can be anxiety ridden. Or in the terms of like a hive mind, we think of a beehive where there's the elite bees that were born that way and the queen bee, and then you're the drone. You don't aspire to anything, right? That's scary as well, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the negative implications of some of these is easy, and that's why a lot of people don't buy into it. Because if you simply just bought into that idea and that was kind of your centering philosophy of life, like it would feel probably hollow after a while.
I would imagine.
Wouldn't leave you with a lot of comfort. But I do think in some ways like that's part of the denial of self aspect of in these is you're not told, and it's dangerous too because the world of ideology, denying yourself, someone can easily use that premise to take advantage of you, right? To set aside your own personal value.
Yeah.
But I think the key points of the denial of self is simply just to set aside your experience and realize that you are more than these things that you touch and feel and smell.
You're a spiritual,
or an identity, right?
Yeah, you're a spiritual entity.
Right.
You have an existence outside of the physical self.
And you take that up to push your limits, right? Not so that you give up all of your agency, right?
Sure.
That's the opposite point. Optimistically, you find a higher inspiration or a higher goal that, like, if
I
it's
think
a game,
there is a pathway of that for those that can sit under the tree, like the Buddha, right? There is sort of those Stoics or the monastic life where you do just cut yourself off from the world, but that's for the few. I think most of us live in the real world, and the day-to-day path for that is to be able to step away from the external and go into meditative states, and really balance out your inner self with your outer world.
Yes.
And that's how you stay grounded mentally and away from things that can drag you down the paths of evil, really. And
I don't think we're here totally for kumbaya. Like, I think we're here to do something, right? So I think, again, when you get down the path of trying to follow your spiritual path and evolve, it's easy to get sidetracked in let's just sit around and have a good time and everything will be all right. I do think you're right that the purpose of this is a restorative inspiration and motivational thing, but ultimately you have something to do, right?
Yeah.
Your goal is not to, God forbid, like Heaven's Gate, right? Where the goal is to get out of the simulation to ascend. We gotta drink the Kool-Aid.
That was the wrong path.
You can go to the wrong place, totally. And again, people take advantage of this because, again, once you start down that thread, same thing with UFOs. When you start down that thread, there are so many people there ready who are psychological liars.
They're buried.
They don't care how they profit.
They'll bury you in that thought. You have to have different inputs. You can't just be consumed entirely by one of those paths, because then you'll be cut off from the other possibilities and spiritual truths in life. I think you have to caution yourself from becoming consumed by some of these outer forces, because I think that you're right. They can kind of cling on to feeble minds or to the malleable ones, and they can really manipulate your perception of reality. And that's why you see people in mental institutions, people losing their minds, things like that. Those that walk the earth that there's something ain't right there.
Yeah.
I
think just like anything,
the Bible called it demonic possession.
Yeah.
But however you think that manipulation is occurring, the body and mind can be a vessel for other entities. So you have to be really careful about what you open yourself up to.
Totally. I that's where I totally agree with you, because just like if you go out in the real world, you're going to come across psychopaths
Yeah,
in disguise, undercover,
that's right.
right? And you're going to find people who are malevolent, and for some reason that you can't square and you'll never be able to, they just get something out of hurting people and taking advantage and getting ahead any way they can. You're if there is something outside the simulation or more higher dimensional beings here around us that we can't perceive, just like a fish really can't understand that there's human beings on two legs walking around, flying around, right?
Yeah.
There's something outside the water, and if there's mean people here, there's mean things there, right?
Yeah, or
And they're
the
looking for
layers
someone
of
to take advantage
yeah, it's
of,
the
you know?
layers of that consciousness bubble and that
Right.
existential what's outside the simulation, if you want to call it that, right?
Yeah.
That break through to our side of it sometimes into our dimension. There's obviously things there, and they've been acknowledged by the powers that be on Earth, and that in the dark corners of the Pentagon and the CIA and everybody else, they know this stuff is real. And they have controlled experiments to deal with it, and that's why you see this. When something occurs in pop culture, like a portal in Stranger Things, like you can bet your bottom dollar that type of experimentation has occurred. They're trying to figure that sort of thing out. Now, hopefully, it can be held at bay. It's not something that they just open the portal to the dark dimension, and
Right.
like in the Avengers, everything comes pouring through it. But that stuff is there. It's a matter of what is it? How do you explain it? How do different cultures, spiritual religions explain it? But I think through time and history, they've all come to agree that there is something over on that other
And we
side.
should be very cautious.
Absolutely.
And these things, if again, like you said, spiritual texts are to be believed. These things that come through, they want to be worshipped as gods.
100%. That's why this neural transduction theory is so interesting to me, because it lends itself to being malleable and possibly manipulated. Tell us about the neural transduction theory of consciousness.
Yeah, so on previous episodes, when we were discussing, Google algorithms and censorship and stuff like that, and dangerous content, we mentioned the work of Robert Epstein. Robert Epstein's not related in any way to
That's
Jeffrey
right.
Epstein. Okay, so let's just get that out of the way. He's a scholar and a psychologist, and he's written a lot about the idea of like the brain being what he calls a bidirectional transducer. Okay, so it suggests
Big words.
Yeah, that the brain converts like external. I'm gonna read my notes here so I get this good.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna try to wing it. The brain converts external stimuli into electrical and chemical activity, and that it can also receive signals from other sources. That's open-ended, right?
Yeah.
Epstein's theory could help explain dreams, hallucinations, and other phenomena.
I mean, just to pause, Tesla said that. He said, I'm getting messages from Martians or aliens.
and
they're telling me how to
inventions.
make these energy machines, and all these inventions I'm getting from my connection to extraterrestrial or interdimensional species.
Spirit guide, call it what you will. He said, I close
Yeah.
my eyes and I'm there with this. And sometimes I ask, like, I can't quite work this out. And then we dissect it piece by piece or build it. And I'm just like, that's not normal average experience.
No. Well, and also he's introducing technology to humanity. They're like, where'd you come up with this idea?
Yeah.
Like
we gotta keep this quiet.
Yeah,
Right?
you get very well. There's a whole rabbit hole of Tesla stuff we could go down. But just quick sidebar is that when he passed away, his files went into the possession of the federal government, and the man in charge of that was Donald Trump's uncle. Yeah. So another episode.
That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Yeah,
That's more fun.
It is. So transduction, continue. Neural
Okay,
transduction.
so basic theory is you're an experiencing node of like a stream of consciousness, right? And so his good example to explain it is if you were to take a musician, like a pianist, and he could play Beethoven's Nth Symphony, right? If you cut open his brain, you will not find the musical notes written on his brain. You will not find information that you'll be able to dissect into it, right? And so his belief is that because it doesn't reside in your brain, your memories don't reside in your brain. You are connected to
it's passing through
the
you.
housing of all of your core memories and self, and the projection of who you are is real as real can be.
Lives in the cloud or something.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then that here is again a broadcast system, and so that also leads to the idea that when you're in those states of flow that we call them, whether you're climbing a mountain or playing a long musical piece, you are contextualizing in your mind a flow of something that's happening in a different rate of time, right? And then you can lend yourself to, if you, and most people aren't like, you can't just always grab a pianist and have him sit down on the spot and do it every time. He has to be in a state, he has to have practiced, he has to have prepared, usually. And when you're in that state, you become the vessel for that to flow through. And so his thinking is, again, that's most of our everyday, all of our experience is essentially that. But there are ways in which, again, external factors or technology, intelligence agencies studying psychology, you can manipulate that signal, right? And that's people's, I guess, theory about 5G and, Wi-Fi and other types of signals that, you can intercept humanity's connection to our divine computer, if that's what you want to call it. And so that's kind of where his theory is trying to combine the nature of that with, the actual chemical and physiological reality of our bodies. And so because, you operate at a certain level of DMT every day. And so there's a lot of theories that are leading to, like, that's kind of what helps generate your hallucination of you actually seeing and observing the reality you're in.
Sure, the dream
not that
world.
It's not real,
and,
but that it's the chemical
subconscious
juice that actually allows you to generate your mental image. And so when you are on these different levels of DMT, it is either reducing down to a micro level or expanding the threshold of what you're able to perceive, whether it's light, information, right? Or
I would imagine that, this laser reveal that Danny Goler has stumbled upon has probably already been, researched and dealt with in some laboratory somewhere. That I'm sure they know that's there, and there's a fabric of space-time interdimensionality in another language, and maybe they're ciphering and they're trying to figure all that out.
Well, they call it mapping. Yeah, so like that we'll refer to the work of Dr. Strassman, Rick Strassman. And he's kind of the first researcher who was able to take DMT and do clinical experiments with grants from the federal government, first person to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And so he's like, the first step we got to do is just prove that it's scientifically it's okay. We can't really go beyond that until we get past this point where the government will say, okay, we can schedule it into research only. And so what will follow that immediately is the people who are like Dr. Epstein, right, where they want to do controlled experiments and replicate these experiences, or like the gentleman you're talking about. Yeah. These are real experiments.
And these experiments have been going on a long time.
Right.
You look at Dunn's experiments in the 20s with time, the idea of time, and the dream studies he did with all these subjects, and that was 100 years ago. So, you're talking about predating modern technology. They were already starting to do these types of studies and research on subconsciousness and how do we connect with time and space, and can we perceive other dimensions and ideas of the timeline and things like that. So
it reminds me of like ayahuasca sessions that I've heard about. I've never personally done it, but I know it's like a very... It's always in a religious setting. That's the only legal way to really do it, is you have to go to these missionaries who have these little like ashrams, I guess. Or you can go to the Amazon, right, and do it with the tribal people there.
Have the guide.
And the whole reason is that when you do these sessions, they have heritage tribal songs that they go back thousands of years. They don't know. They don't even know. They say the plants gave them to us, right? But these songs that they chant, sing, play, whatever, it's like watching a movie, and that when you take it and they begin this thing, they are taking you on a specific journey. It's not just like you're sitting at home and your mind goes wherever. It's like they're saying, hey, we're going to do this. And what happens is, depending on the song, it through generations has generated similar experiences, messages. Sometimes, they often talk about in the Amazon, the goddess, the golden mother, the mother of the Amazon, whatever, that there's this kind of, I would say, Isis type of goddess that people talk about encountering. And groups that maybe are all in the session together, that they experience the same thing independently without talking about it. They're just sitting there feeling and seeing and experiencing, but yet they will come saying, did you see that? I saw that too. Whether it was, a thing or a person or a feeling or something.
All cultures and sort of spiritual belief systems have their different ways of trying to understand all of this. I think for Western culture, we're usually drawn to sort of the Christianity and what was that worldview and related to dimensionality and consciousness and things like that. And of course we have the messenger, of the universe and in the Christ figure. So, I mean, what was the perspective of, I guess the way that that Christ talked about sort of spiritual things. You know,
Right.
so much of what he said was sort of mystical and grabbed at kind of some of these Eastern ideas. And there's all these theories about where did he go in the missing years, you know, from age 12 to 30? Did he have a journey of, and why did the Magi come from the East, you know, to him as a
Right.
child and things like that? So, I mean, going to that Western culture understanding of these things and grounded in some type of spiritual understanding, what do you think was the perception of that the Christ figure and his transmutation and his, you know, Mel Gibson's making the
Yeah.
Resurrection movie, right? And what do you think about that, I guess, Western religious
How we digest that.
explanation? Yeah, how
Yeah.
does so much of our culture see that? What the lens is?
Well, I can definitely say that it's not missing from, if you dig in, it's not missing from biblical record, right?
Yeah.
This idea that we exist in some space, fallen nature, lower dimension, whatever, here, right? And that beyond this experience, you know, there's heaven and there's hell, but it's very clear that this realm is, you know, has a spiritual duality to it, to where it's where the spirit meets a physical matter,
Yeah.
right? And so there's
And
what
I would
you-
say just the idea of heaven and hell, I see it as almost like if you were trying to explain this to a child, those are the metaphors you might use, like black and white, like the yin yang, right? So
Yes.
continue.
Right. And so, you know, you're here, you have physical and biological impulses, right? And so you have the choice to buy into that, or, you know, again, in the teachings, it's set yourself aside, listen to my higher calling, and I'll lead you to greater things than your appetites will. And
How can you raise your existential
Right.
understanding?
right. And even Paul, you know, in his letter says that at a social level, we are fighting higher powers. Right.
Yeah.
So that means like at the political, at the civil, at the social, at the personal, at the interpersonal, but also in the subconscious. All of these layers are fighting the same
The
battle.
powers and principalities, right?
Right.
So yeah.
And you perceive each layer differently, right? And so I think that's where we sometimes we like to isolate things, but there is a holistic way. And I think, you know, again, these ideas lends credence to this. And Christ said, you know, in his day, they were looking for a physical king to come show up with a sword and take back
Yeah.
everything they'd had from the Roman Empire. But he said, you know, you don't understand.
Yeah.
And when he's talking about tearing down the temple and rebuilding it in the 3 days,
Yeah.
they
So
thinking,
much
again,
of that,
physical, literal temple. And he's
Yeah.
saying, no, my spirit is not
we're
here.
talking about high level spirituality stuff.
I'm talking
yeah.
about the temple of my body.
Consciousness. Yeah.
Right? And, you know, it's said very clearly, I believe it's in Acts or somewhere in the New Testament with Paul, he talks about that our body is a temple to the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Right? It's a vessel.
Yeah.
I believe in Psalms it says we are vessels in the Lord's temple forever, right? So our spirits, whether it's we're literally like, in some sense, if you want to depict it, some type of literal vessel sitting somewhere in a collection where our soul and all this stuff is happening and resides. Or again, that what we truly are is some type of essence like water or light,
Yeah.
and that this is just a housing for it. So
I
it's
think
not.
so. I think very often the sort of the existential spirituality, consciousness, mysticism of Scripture is lost on people. I think a lot of people just see the Bible. Oh yeah, it's a collection of kids' stories and Sunday school learning and all this, but it's like much more dense and philosophical in nature, almost more related to Buddhism than anything else. You know, that whole the gospel journey of Christ is very much one of a mystic. You know, he emerges from the desert and he has
He
someone,
spoke universal truth.
yeah, and he has someone that comes before him and sort of lives off the land and eats locusts and honey, and they're crazy, right? They're these crazy kind of desert dwellers, and they go disappear for 40 days and have a spiritual journey through the desert. Maybe
You want
peyotes
to talk about
involved.
hallucinations, man.
right.
I mean, you just have to really try to comb through. Anybody who's interested, visions of prophets, you know, not revelations, of course, but we like to read that back into the real world, the vision as, oh, you're going to see that physically.
Yeah.
But just like in the Old Testament, when you understand like what they're seeing in the vision form, and you just draw it out, what you depict in your mind, and realize that like, what they're seeing is some type of other landscape.
Yeah.
That these things that they're seeing carry so much to unpack because they're visual symbols that resonate, and also you have a continuity of these things. And that's where I think with the DMT experiments, it's a similar. There's a replicatable aspect of this where there's some layer of your consciousness in your own brain. Maybe you go, right? That's just, everybody has it. It's like the Easter egg there. The baseline of your coding is some access to this weird trippy vision or a trippy vision, you know, and
it's really the same thing
it's
that
not real.
it's the same thing that art does. The greatest art, it speaks impactful, untold truths to you that you may not even understand, right?
More than words can. Right?
Absolutely. It evokes these feelings and thoughts and, you know, existential questions. And that almost like the Bible is this living art form, that these eternal, you know, subconscious messages are being given to us in this, you know, ancient group of texts,
right?
You know, 50 odd some odd books, and not even to mention the uncanonized ones that were too weird to include. You know, you go back to the groups that decided, okay, what books are going to go into this Bible. There's all these other books that they're like, this is too weird. The Enoch stories and, you know, other stories, the Gnostic, you know, Gospels and things like that. You go look at some of that, and you go even further into that spiritual sort of, you know, confusing milieu of stuff, and you're sort of, wow, there's a lot more here. There's all this background of subconscious understanding and sort of spiritual channeling, and who are these people who wrote this stuff down? You know, it gets back to that Tesla thing where he's getting this information from somewhere else. And it always reminds me of like the book of Revelation, you know, like John is trying to describe these things, these visions that he's seeing, and he's exiled on this island, you know, and he's just trying to put it into words, and it comes out as like monsters and beings and, you know, all these things that you can't understand, allegorical metaphor.
And I think they mirror a reality that we can observe.
Yeah.
My personal thought is that I don't think that he was observing a future in our reality, but rather a universe, like in the Old Testament, because you have to switch, because in Old Testament visions, it's always showing you a symbol, right? Like one famous one is, you know, in Daniel,
Ezekiel's wheel, right?
Ezekiel's wheel, when you experience that. But I'm talking, that definitely is an encounter directly. But I mean, in terms of like let me show you something and tell you something, was when Daniel interpreted the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, right? With
there's so much of it.
The universal
in the Old
man
Testament.
with the different
you have
layers
Moses
of metals
at the bush. You have, you know, the guys surviving the fire.
Right.
You know,
these
like
things,
the lion fighting the
greater
lions.
truth that is not about this thing showing up around you, right?
It's metaphysical.
It's metaphysical.
Yeah, it is.
And so, but it parallels the operations of our ever-present simulation. I think it's kind of like trying to tell you, hey, this is operating at all times in this simulation. That is why, you know, you're going to see many antichrists. It says that in the New Testament as well. You're going to see...
It's trying to understand and explain it to us, right?
Right.
In a way that we can digest.
This kind of soul's journey, right? And, you know...
That's why so much of like Christ's teaching is in these little stories and parables and metaphors. Because if he actually told you straight up, you couldn't understand it. You know, it'd be you'd
arrive at a point where everybody thinks you're crazy.
Yeah, it'd probably make you nuts, right? So instead, he uses trees and birds and animals and plants to explain what he's trying to explain to you about your own spiritual existence and the value of you rising above your physical plane, and, you know, getting more to those core truths of consciousness and existence. And
well, and two, I think you can find, and not to get too off the weeds on the gospel, but or the teachings of Christ, but I think where I found a lot of comfort in it was the messages like where he's like, you know, the birds are fed and they don't fall without the Creator noticing. And so that gives you some comfort of like, in all of this journey, forget just needing some dogma to follow. In the journey of simulation and meaning and purpose and all the shit that we experience in our lives that's trying to push us downstream, when you hear something like, that's not forgotten, it's not unnoticed.
It's like we're all part of that living organism,
right?
It puts you back into that lens of like, this is all existence together in a life, you know, life form of its own, the entire universe, you know. And it's very rooted in deep philosophy and mysticism, which is the way that I see the Bible, you know. And I think if more people open themselves up to it being that, they can more clearly understand the message that's trying to be conveyed, and
life hacks. It's like life hacks on steroids.
You know, like walk the path you need to walk, and don't get off that path. There's all this around you to drag you deeper into the mud of physical existence when you need to elevate your consciousness and your mind and your spiritual health to live a better life. If you do that, then your physical life will follow. It's not the other way around. You cannot,
Right.
you can't drag the dog by its nose, right?
Right.
You have to let it kind of walk along, and that's how you train. I don't know that, to me, it's more about that
Well,
walking.
that's where you can get psychological too, and that's kind of where especially Jordan Peterson breaks it down. Where he's like, in terms of free will, there's your habits. We are mostly habits, right? And you have freedom, some freedom. It's very hard when you reinforce habits for a long time. So this is not just like a static system, right? This is an ongoing, manipulatable at a micro level, and then
That's
through
right.
time, that actually dictates your potential. Is your through time control of all these mechanisms, setting up the right harmony of those habits, and then you get little bits of that free will in the window where you can make those small choices for yourself, and then that gets ingrained into your reality and becomes concrete, and then you have another freedom, small freedom somewhere
It's
else.
like they say
It's
in
not total
Gladiator,
100% freedom at all times.
and those choices, what we do now echoes in eternity. It's like,
I teared up when I heard that because
yeah.
I think that was so key for this moment. Because I mean, obviously, and I'd love to see another Matrix movie where the story I think should be years later, living in the wake of the one, right, the one who sacrificed them all. So then it kind of we see him where we are now today, where the cult of the one is going around, enslaving the machines, beating down anybody who doesn't believe in kind of worship and
there's going to be a few different cults out there with all this technology.
You could really see a cool interplay
100%.
on how that we idolize this being, he shows us the way, but then we're so quickly able to take that and turn that into this is my dogma.
Yeah.
You're an infidel.
You have the human god, the cyborg god, and the AI god.
Right.
Which would you like to follow?
Right. And you could totally, and so that's kind of where we're at today. I think we have these warring philosophies, and you can take any of these philosophies and weaponize them and turn them into institutional ideas. But I think there are a few teachers in history that truly, if you just listen to them, sit with them, meditate on their stuff, that you'll realize what they're talking about, and then you'll realize like what lies you've been told or what you've experienced this, like this is not really what this was, but it was built on top of this. It's just we kind of glazed over when we got to that
That's exactly right. Well, I think, we'll definitely put links to our different sources here in the description. You can go do some deeper reading of your own, and I think try to explore this in conversation with your friends and family. I think more people need to think about this more, especially with all that's happening around us. With technology and questions of existence and interdimensionality and all, there's just a lot going on right now in the world today that I think people need to prepare themselves for all that will come in the years and decades ahead.
Yeah, and the purpose of us getting deep off into here into spiritual and scientific and technological, I think it's
all intertwined.
It's important for us, right? And we did this with the intention of like simulation theory is in many different personifications.
That's right.
Right.
It's talked about in different ways.
People, especially with the UFO stuff and reality, people are like, oh, if we find out UFOs are real, this is going to break those Christians because you're not going to be able to fit that in the Bible.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, but wait, like these people are prepared for.
Yeah.
They already live with the idea that there's something more every day. It's just that those people are going to work the UFO phenomena into their existing belief that already gives that possibility. And so, I think it's important for people to realize like these contexts are here, and sometimes, some people are prepared more for the Matrix to break and to glitch out than others. And, I think
you need to work on your mind.
Yeah.
So that you can really, have a clear understanding of what will occur in the coming days and years ahead.
Yeah, and I don't think dwelling too long on simulation. It doesn't have to be a downer, right? Because again, I
don't see it as that at all. Simulation theory is just another way to try to explain existential questions of consciousness and eternal, universal existence. I think
right, or how you can have full experiences and sensations in a dream, and you can touch something, you can feel something, you can see a loved one, you can relive a moment, and it was just as real as the moment you experienced it. That's because we have the capacity for experience beyond our physical sensations.
That's right.
And that's what all this is rooted in.
Yeah, there's a lot of untapped.
How do you want to interpret that?
You have untapped materials in your own mind.
And
a
we're
way
all
to,
very powerful, I believe,
yeah, it's a
truly.
way to unlock them, access them. Meditation's a huge tool for that.
Yep.
So
Yep. Well, I think that kind of gets us as far into the weeds as we can get
yeah,
today.
absolutely.
You know, I know a lot of people out there are also suffering from the TikTok ban that went into effect last night. And so hopefully, stuff like this, we're finding, people are finding ways to dig in and kind of give their brains some brain food
And there,
in the meantime.
there is content out there that can help you raise your level. There's obviously a lot in social media that will drag you further into your physical force and physical form and decline. And you've got to rise above that, find ways to get out of the weeds of life. Right. And so there's a lot of good out there as well. It's not
Absolutely. That's the thing,
it's not all shallow.
It's both difficult, but also easier now than ever to find the people like you, or to, again, even if they're not exactly like you, find people who can uplift you. There are communities out there, whether online.
Mm-hmm.
I have people I game with, and I also encourage everybody who's looking for a home, get on X. Me and Johnny are on X. The show is on X,
Mm-hmm.
and I've truly enjoyed, again, you get to curate a little bit more. So go find what makes you happy.
That's right.
Put that in your feed. And engage with those people,
Yep.
right? Don't go on the doom scroll.
That's right.
Hop in the comment section. Talk to people. You will see so much cool stuff. You'll learn cool
100%.
information. And you get to contribute to. It's uncensored, like kind of like Reddit. How Reddit used to be. That's how I feel like. This is the first time I've been excited for social media.
Yeah.
In like probably ever. So
yeah,
encourage people to.
And the
join us on
last
X.
thing I would say, you need to take a little bit of time and read a book. Just try
That's
to
one thing I've
unplug
been
from a
doing.
screen.
I've tried to make it a goal. I want to try to read a chapter of the Bible every day, and then part of some book that I'm just reading for other purposes.
I've been
And
reading the
that's been
Steve
great.
Jobs biography.
Yeah.
Super interesting. There's just, reading is it's a very important way to exercise the mind. And I don't want people to lose the importance of reading on getting lost in a book, whether it's the Wheel of Time or something, like
Wheel of Time is a great one to get lost
yeah,
in.
you need to read. We all need to read.
For people who are feminists out there, you might get some enjoyment out of Robert Jordan. I'm not gonna lie, because his
the
world,
greatest authors are like that.
he
Tolkien. There's
said push
so
the
much
boundary.
so much richness in the Lord of the Rings, and I'd
Because
like to
women
go
have all the
reread
power in the
those.
Wheel of Time in the beginning, right? Especially,
Sure.
and he plays with these ideas of like, what does the world look like when all the women are in control and the men are truly crazy, right? And he plays with all these types of themes, and he works in yin yang, and it's there when you pay attention, but you can keep rolling if you don't.
We'll talk about that another episode.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks, Johnny. It's a great day to
y'all
record,
later.
and y'all stay warm. Bye, everybody.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.